biographies and forgive. I want to make sure I do honor to these folks one by one. Robin Holder is an artist motivated by the complexities of racial inequity, social justice, and identity. A native New Yorker, she studied at the Art Students League in Mexico and Ecuador, and further developed her skill in lithography while in Amsterdam. In addition to work as a printmaker, as a public artist, Robin has completed numerous projects, including a plaza for PS5 in Manhattan and a 34-paneled laminated glass mural located at the Flushing Avenue subway station. Robin's work is found in numerous public collections. She has a long exhibition record, including a 2009 mid-career retrospective at the Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland, where she donated her archive in 2024. Eleanor Magid is an artist, community activist, and educator. She's the founder of the Lower East Side Printshop, established in 1968 during a New York City teacher strike. It is still operating today. After attending Smith College, Magid moved to New York in the early 1950s to further her work in art, including her time at the Printmaking Workshop. Starting in 1968, Eleanor taught at Queens College through the Percy Ellis Sutton Search for Education, Elevation, and Knowledge educational program known as SEEK, which was launched 2 years earlier to holistically support students, primarily Black and Puerto Rican high school graduates, advance through college. And lastly, though not least, Nitza Tufiño is a prominent Nuyorican artist who is also a curator, an educator, and a consultant on Puerto Rican art. In addition to a foundational academic art education, she learned firsthand about the political role of the artist from her father, the renowned painter and printmaker Rafael Tufiño. In addition, as an advocate for culture in East Harlem for decades, Nitza was active during the earliest years of El Museo del Barrio and the collective studio Taller Boricua, both founded between 1969 and 1970. Her work as a public artist includes murals at the 86th Street and 103rd Street subway stations, and a sculpture at the Grosvenor Neighborhood House, which was the product of collaborating with high school students enrolled in a high school equivalency course. Her work, predominantly paintings and prints, is collected and exhibited widely. So this just skims the surface, and I hope I hit all the requisite marks of these very accomplished artists and community builders. So now we're going to take just a few minutes, like I mentioned briefly, when you were in the print shop, and maybe one or two things that you took away leading out of there. You ready, Robin?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I arrived at the Printmaking Workshop the fall of 1977 after living abroad for 5 years. And I asked Bob for a job. Now, Bob, as many of us know, was remarkable in that you could show up and get any kind of job. He basically asked you, what are you good at? And he asked me if I wanted to train to become a master printer. And I said, what would I do? What would that entail? And he said, well, I train you. And when you got to a point when you had a skill level, you could print for Elizabeth Catlett. And I said, oh, I don't have the ego for that, forget that. So I think I'll be better at administrative work because I'm very organized. I run a household, I have a child, and I'm very honest. So I can articulate clearly, I can listen clearly. And I started as the community program director, and I stayed at the workshop, and my position grew and grew and grew until I became the assistant director, and I left my position there about 1987. I continued to work in the shop doing my own work for a few years until I got my first public art commission, and I was able to buy my own Charles Brand press.
No, I'm good.
Got it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm Eleanor Magid.
Let's check.
Not close enough, okay. I got to Bob's.
Oh, want me to hold it for you?
Oh, okay, thank you. I got to Bob's shop in 1965 when we had just gotten back from Boulder, Colorado, and everyone said, you've got to go to Bob Blackbird's shop. So that was my first stop. I began to work I was much impressed with the way people work together and the value of a print shop because of its press. We shared presses. I was overwhelmed by that shop and its way of working. I don't think I've ever had a stronger experience of community building than in Bob's shop. In 1968, my daughter, who was the first member of the Lower East Side print shop, she's sitting over there, and her friends came into my studio, and they decided that they would make prints because I had a press. That was the real reason we became a print shop. We developed a very interesting group of ideas with the shop. We bound books, we wrote stories, we illustrated. We took over the school curriculum in one project. Then I was called by somebody who said, "Would you like to teach at Queens College?" I said, "Gee, I don't know." The next week I was there, stayed 33 years. But those students the Sikh students, were also very interested. I took a whole group of Sikh students to Bob's shop, and there are still lots of photographs available of my students coming into Bob's shop and were so welcomed. Then the colleges began closing down. 1968 was a very dramatic time. The colleges closed down, so I said, well, if you want to come to my house, you can. They did. That began an intergenerational project, which I still feel was one of the most interesting things I saw, that we learned very fast, all generations together.
My first encounter with Bob Blackburn was through my father in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has a big tradition in printmaking, and it happened that James Baldwin at one time visited Puerto Rico, and also Martin Luther King went to talk about civil rights and all of that. So Bob was mentioned in those situations. Then later on, when I went to school in Mexico, that my mentor was Leopoldo Mendez. That's when I met Charles White and Elizabeth Catlett. They were very good friends with my mother when they first moved to Mexico during the time of MacArthur, that the Mexicans really helped all the blacks to come in, all of that, and live in Mexico. Then later on, when I finished school, I came to New York in 1968, and I got involved with the Young Lords and the Puerto Rican Workshop. And I got in touch with Bob, and Bob invited me to go to the print shop on 17th Street. And it was all about social justice and all of that. I started learning some other new techniques and all of that. And then we started where we will give classes like at churches and unite the families. We used to do that with him. And I learned a lot about printmaking. Also, he was very much, because I was also a painter, he got me in contact with Jacob Lawrence and Romeo Bearden, which was really helpful towards my paintings, to exhibit it with Cinque Gallery and all of that. So it was a whole encompass, holistic situation that he had for young people. And then we continued doing this in El Barrio, where we did a lot of the posters for the Young Lords and the newspaper. And, how would I say, garbage offensive, fighting to get health and housing out there, but then continuing with social justice in terms of printmaking. Then later on, I got to exhibit with Romeo Bearden. He got some of my painting with UNICEF because he was involved in the United Nations. And as the time went by, I submitted to get some commissions, which I got, and I said, Bob, I got some money. So I want you to do some of the printing. I want to do the editions at the shop. So it was one way. He gave me a hand, and I gave him a hand. We help each other with money and things like that. So that was really great for me. And then we continue, always, and we opened up at Printshop, Steel Screen, and other things that Boricua, the Puerto Rican Workshop, always with the ideas that both have of working collectively, helping each other in new techniques, bringing young people in and sharing and all that wealth, and all the other artists that used to come visit him from nationally from all over the world. It was fantastic for a young person to have that. So I'm really grateful to Bob for that.
So, we have many decades of history with us today, stories, recollections, impacts, but I would like to start with our first half of our afternoon together to try to paint a picture, cast a picture for our audience. What was Bob's shop like? What was he like? How did he run his shop? What were the facilities like? If we were to bring us back in time and explain and orient us to what you would encounter should we were able to visit, how would you share that? How would you reflect on that? And whomever would like to start is welcome to.
Well, Bob, as Corinne Jennings said, was the chaos man. He delighted in creating insanity, but at the same time, he had a very particular gift of sensing what a person's potential was. So he would gently and very subtly guide you in a direction where you could actually find your own voice. The workshop, when I first started working there, was located at 114 West 17th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue on the south side of the street. And there was a main general workshop area that had 3 etching presses in it. And there was a lithographic press on the side near the windows and a private lithographic room and 4 private etching rooms and a small print collection room, which was not secure because one day we walked in and saw footprints going up the wall. The wall didn't reach the ceiling and somebody had somehow gotten into the print room by walking up the side of the wall. The workshop was functioning when I was there in a very interesting way. There were many avenues that you could take to participate in the printmaking workshop or be a part of the workshop. The core of it was the general workshop area where you paid a monthly fee, you got a locker, you got a shelf, and some of the solvents and some of the basic tools were free. You could access those free of charge. You had to bring your own inks, for the most part your own paper, and of course your own particular tools. So many people would pay us a standard monthly fee, come to the workshop, and work whatever schedule there was. When I was there, the workshop actually never closed. It was open 365 days a year, and I think it officially closed to the public at around 11 or midnight, but the people that worked there as printers or interns or scholarship artists or administrative people worked through the night. So we would work like from 11 in the evening to like 6 in the morning. Bob was very committed to a conventional, historic relationship between artists who could be sculptors, painters, collagists, photographers, filmmakers, and the printer. The printer was conventionally a person who had built up very, very sophisticated skills in specific techniques. It could be lithography, which was where Bob's heart was. And interestingly enough, when I was there, most of the lithographers and the printers that did lithography were women, such as Kai January, Agnes Murray, Kabuya Bowens, and it's a very stone lithography is a very manual, labor-intensive process. And involves chemistry it's kind of magical because there's a certain point, you're shaking your head, so obviously you know, there's a point at which your image can disappear and then you have to bring it up again. So it's got some kind of like magical component to it. So Bob really fostered and encouraged and tried to have as much activity as possible where there was a printer from the printmaking workshop, hi Susan, and an artist who would come in with their concept or part of an idea or part of an image and work with the printer to create an edition. That was the conventional way that a printer would work with an artist. What we have to keep in mind is that that is a very sensitive, very highly personal relationship. The printer has to or had to be a person that could understand the artist's essential directive or motivation and suggest techniques that were appropriate to realize that concept or that image. It's basically, how many of you are artists? Okay, so you know that making art is an impossible task. I mean, we're doing something that's impossible. We're trying to put in 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions something that's in the air or in our imagination. So that's a very delicate relationship, the communication between the printer and the artist. And Bob seemed to be able to match people very well, very appropriately for personalities. And of course, there's egos flying all over the place when you have a group of artists in one space. That's another issue. But there were also situations where a publisher would rent out one of the rooms, private rooms, and use one of the workshop's printer, or even bring somebody from the outside in because they needed the equipment to create an edition or to develop a project. In addition to all that, there were classes. So people could come, learn particular techniques, and printmaking, as many of us know, is a wonderful avenue to create something that's somewhat satisfying, even if you don't consider yourself artistic, like most people don't. And that was also a strategy where a lot of innovative techniques could be shared, because there are people like Krishna Reddy, who was developing his color viscosity printing. He was working, teaching it through NYU, but he was developing sort of his own approach to color viscosity, which involved different viciousness, or different mixes of inks, different softness or hardness of rollers. There was, for example, Nancy Wells, who mastered collagraphs and did beautiful, extraordinary works with collagraphs. So the classes were another way that people could come to the shop. Some of the people were artists or students or invited guests. Some of the people were what you would call hobbyists, or people just really liked printmaking. We also had guest artists where Bob would invite a renowned artist, often from abroad or from another part of the country, to come and have an edition developed. There were also, we had at the time that I was there, 8 portable table etching presses, small ones, little Martech presses. Most of them were Martech presses. And we would send artists out into various communities, underserved communities. We worked with recreational centers, social service, we'd have partnerships with social service agencies, the rec rooms of housing projects, churches, schools, many different kinds of community sites, and teach young children or anybody who wanted to come to do basic printmaking, which was very fascinating. Using these little presses were kind of magical for kids because they loved turning the rollers and the wheel of the press and seeing the bed go through the rollers, and making multiples was kind of exciting for them. So that was also a way to give artists jobs, teaching in that program. Most of the people in the workshop, when I was there, who were working for the workshop, functioned in more than one way. They would be be monitors for the general shop area and maybe do printing, or they work in the community programs and teach classes. So there were ways that people could patch enough income together to survive. But I think one of the most extraordinary things about Bob and the way that he set a tone in the printmaking workshop was that everybody was welcome and anybody was welcome. And this is a very real, unique, serious issue because, as some of us know, about 25 or 30% of creative people have some sort of mental fluidity. And that's a real reality, some sort of issue or experience or trauma. In addition to that, when you're in a space developing and creating your work, you're really emotionally and spiritually raw. You have to be. If your work is going to be authentic, you have to unveil yourself. So the spirit of the workshop held in grace all of this real, extraordinary dignity and creative intention. And you could feel it. I could feel it when you were in the shop. And I think most people who ever worked in the shop or came through the shop sensed this very special, almost spiritual, creative vulnerability and beauty and integrity. And Bob, the whole time that I worked with Bob, I never heard him actually criticize the content of anybody's work, which was very important for many of us people of color, because this was, when I was there, this was the late 70s throughout the 80s, and a lot of us were invisible in the art world. That was another aspect of the printmaking workshop, because a lot of us knew, I mean, we've known each other for what, 40 years or more? And there are hundreds of other people that we worked and interacted with as colleagues who shared experiences building careers, trying to even, the most basic, learning how to write your artist statement, learning how, what was your position technically in the printmaking world, where were you in terms of developing your own personal visual language, where were you in your development of your dream intentions. All of those kinds of things were discussed by people working in the workshop privately or in small groups. And so that was a very unique and special aspect of developing as a creative person. Also figuring out, like, how are you gonna live as an artist? That many people got to a point where they said, this isn't gonna work for me. I need to have more prosperity. I need to have more material security, or I'm raising a family, I can't afford to do this. And then the rest of us figured out how we were gonna continue being artists. And I think one of the things that unfortunately I do not hear of now too much is a sense of generosity. We really shared information with each other. If somebody had found a commercial gallery that was an intelligent gallery and an honest gallery, they might share that information or recommend somebody. So the workshop was a very helpful, glorious, very safe place for, I would say, hundreds and hundreds of people. The only one thing I want to add was every day that I went into that shop for the years I was there, something unexpected would happen, or somebody would come in from overseas, and you'd meet all kinds of interesting people. If anybody was going to go somewhere, they'd say, Bob, I'm going to Venezuela. Okay, where's the Rolodex? Who do we know in Venezuela? Okay, I'm going to Uruguay. Oh, who do we know in there? You know, I'm going to Kenya. Oh, I know somebody, call this person. No matter where you were going, he would try to connect you with other folks. I witnessed a couple of really beautiful things. There was once a young woman who was from China, and she came to Bob, and she said she was just completely panic-stricken. She said, they're gonna marry me off when I return home, they have my husband picked out. I can't go home. She had some sort of a scholarship to work at the workshop and it had ended. So Bob said, we'll work something out. He called Rosina Florio at the Art Students League, and Rosina gave her a scholarship, and she was able to prolong her stay and get another status to her visa. He did that a number of times for different people. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I wanted to add to what you were saying, because with my father, that he's a printmaker, we wanted to do an edition of an old coffee plantains from Puerto Rico. There were 8 prints, and we were trying to find, so I said, oh, Bob is the best place to do this, and my father came from Puerto Rico and stayed here in New York until he finished the whole edition with Bob, and Bob was fantastic to do that with him, and that was something that he did during the 50s, and finally it was accomplished in the 80s, you know what I mean? Also, another fantastic thing about Bob is that during that period, the 80s, a lot of the Latin Americans, Claudio Juarez, Mario Torá, who was for Chilean, Quiroz, they were coming because of Pinochet. You know, they had to leave the country because otherwise their heads were going to be cut off. So we were looking for ways how we can get these people jobs as printmakers. So at El Museo del Barrio, since I was in the education department, I found a print shop over there, and I said, well, I need students, so we hired them, and then we worked with immigration so that they could stay here in the States. So there was always a collaboration between organizations, you know, the Puerto Ricans, the Blacks, the Jewish, you know, all of that, trying to help people that were being pushed out of their countries because of situations that they couldn't get back because their heads are going to be cut off. Allende was also another one that she had to leave with her daughter, and we formed Caimán Gallery, which is what's on Soho. You know, so there's a lot of collaboration here. It's all pro-social justice. That's what printmaking does. Mm-hmm. Printmaking is a way of us to not only to prove, but to connect with each other and our feelings and our history, and change things in our country. In America, this is a great country, but if it wasn't for printmaking, we wouldn't be anywhere.
Well, I wanted to say that I feel that this is a very important set of issues to talk about right now, because we're in social and cultural crisis, really across the earth. This is the kind of time that the Lower East Side Printshop, which was the first community shop to start in 1968, was also in a serious crisis. Martin Luther King had been killed in the spring. In the fall, we had a school strike. The whole city was in crisis. Children were wandering around. Their parents couldn't stay home because there was no babysitting available. And it's that sort of thing that breaks open the issues, particularly I think, between the art world, which Bob was very focused within the art world and had editioning and was connecting to the art world, and its current marketing and branding practices and so on. And the idea of the arts as languages in the common domain, which I feel is the core of what we should do. We forget between crises. We go back to the more, having to earn a living, therefore having to work with these marketing and branding ideas. But the language in the common domain is what broke open with these community programs that we're all representing here. Widening the access to the arts. Bob, if anything, his whole shop was dedicated to that broadening and widening. Who was an artist? Who was a human being who could express? We don't all go very far. After first grade, second grade, the visual arts sort of disappear in favor of math and in favor of language, verbal expression. So very few people really develop as they might as artists. And this opening up of the arts to the entire human community is what I feel, Bob, of anybody in the United States represents that potential. And we all sort of expanded out of that. I know that when I came into the workshop, I was a printmaker. I wasn't connected to community work, but my daughter was in school, and when the school broke down, that brought me right in. I had time because I was looking for a job. I couldn't go out and get a job because my daughter was at home. There was no babysitting. So I had time that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Somebody said, well, we don't have time. We need these kinds of developments right now. We need to break open again. People don't have time. Sometimes you have time because you're thrown out of your normal way of living. You can't earn a living. What am I going to do? In the case of the Lower East Side Printshop, which was the first, Bob would come over and watch us, and he would say, this is what brought me into the arts. Having these children working, this is what brought me in. Now, how did he come in? The WPA. I looked it up because I thought it was from 1935 to 1943 was the WPA. It was a federal agency. It employed 8,500,000 people during its time. I had never realized that before. I just found that. It was.
And also, he was in the Cedar Artist Project, and he hired a lot of printmakers.
Yes.
And he worked with the Printshop.
Yes.
Doing that.
But
So
he
was
himself
fantastic.
came in as a young person to the WPA project. So many things in the United States, the post offices, all those murals, so many people's careers were supported by they weren't high-paying jobs, but they let people get along.
And a country that fosters and motivates and disseminates a public art says a lot about their humanity, a lot about what they think of culture. There was just something I wanted to add to what you were saying, Nitza, is that we who are practicing artists and practicing printmakers know that the process, the creative process, involves geometry, mathematics, history, literature, sociology, psychology, spirituality, chemistry. You cannot create art without knowing something about physics, without knowing something about sociology and the relationship of cultures, the relationship of humanity to each other, the conflicts and the struggles and the aspirations of human endeavor. This is all a part of the creative process. Printmaking traditionally was considered the lower rung of this white Eurocentric male-dominated mentality where the sculptors and the public monument artists were on the top, and then the solitary, anguished, pathetic artist, male, who had some rich white woman supporting them were then, and then you had well, photographers didn't even exist. But it's important to know that printmaking conventionally years ago was considered, because it's a little too close to crafts. Why? Because we had to learn real skills. Real physics, real chemistry.
I'd like to add something into that. But printmaking itself, only a few people came into printmaking. It wasn't the whole population. It wasn't a whole bunch of school kids. No, they were outside. What we learned by having the print shop happen during a school strike was that little kids can watch complex techniques and do them. And I tell this story over and over. Krishna came in and demonstrated viscosity printing for us. And I watched a little 5-year-old, and he's looking and watching. He got it. He really got it. And he demonstrated it to his mother. And she got it.
And that's a very technical, very complex, very complex technical approach, yeah.
And they got it. It was the fastest learning you ever saw. And you realize that at some point, we have separated ourselves into age groups.
Yeah, but you know what? Something fantastic about Bob, and I'll tell you this, on 17th Street, you'll be out there 11, 12 o'clock, you don't have a place where to go, and you know the Printshop there, you'll be, Bob, open the door, please, somebody, send the key down, please, throw the key, and then they will throw the basket with the key, and then you will go up either, oh, wait a second, I don't have a place where to go, so you will do
Sleep
some
on
pretty
top
much,
of the
you'll sleep
little
on,
press.
exactly, you will sleep on top of the press. So this is called humanism, this is called humanity, this is what he was all about.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say that you know, after the Lower East Side Printshop started, it happened again. It was because of crisis. We discovered things along the way because we had to. But then Bob said, "I'm going to do this across the board." And Orlando Condiso, I'm sure a lot of you know Orlando, had gotten here from Peru. He got off the plane. He came to Bob because everybody knew to go to Bob. Bob put him on a truck with a press and sent him to Brooklyn. And he had some paper and and he got little kids from Brooklyn. So that all of this sort of was very rapid development and escalation. But I don't think it had happened before. On the other hand, somebody, I have no idea who, put us next to a group of Native Americans at the Museum of Natural History, and we were people of all ages making prints, and the family, Native American family, were weaving porcupine quills. Now, I don't know who decided to do that. I wasn't sure about it, but they did that. They recognized this kind of change. I don't know what split us into age groups for learning. The Industrial Revolution? What made that happen?
Can I jump in? This has been wonderful so far. I don't want to interrupt the flow, but I want to take a step back and just to reflect a little bit for a minute. You know, it's wonderful to hear about the kind of special space, physical or otherwise, that's created when artists come together. An artist-run and artist-driven space where individuals and collective groups can come together, that it's a person perhaps driving that, a special person is driving that, but there becomes a kind of freedom to create together, both individually and all together. It sounds like this idea of collectivity was not just about one community, but many, many overlapping communities working together alongside one another. And so I'm curious if you have any reflections on the ideas of how the communities, plural, that you participated in within Bob's shop and within the shop. And then, so eventually we'll be talking about other communities, as we've already started to do, ways in which the idea of community was formed and maybe changed over time. Nitza, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, we had Taller Boricua, the Puerto Rican workshop. For many, many years we did in the 60s because of the young lords. We did a lot of silk screen and stuff like that. And then when the digital age came about, they started doing digital stuff and we totally forgot about printmaking. So in 2000, I went to meet a couple of Chicano print shops in California, Chicago, with Notre Dame, with Gil Cardenas, and we realized, wait a second, we gotta bring the print shop back. So I reorganized, I got a grant, and I got 3 presses. When we had a building, 121 East, and then we decided that we were gonna get artists that do all other kinds of work, but they're gonna learn printmaking, and they're gonna learn all the techniques, and then they are gonna learn teach other people, and we're gonna do portfolios, and we're gonna get together with Consejo Gráfico and the other, so we're gonna do it nationally, and we're gonna work with the community, and we're gonna teach other people to come in and work, and especially if they have health problems, and they wanna talk about it, so you could do portfolios about those. You could do about history. So you'll be sharing if you're Black, you're Puerto Rican, if you're Greek, or whatever, you can make all of those combinations. So the way we function is that we give classes, we don't charge for the classes for children or whatever, and the artists that we have, they come in and they share their work and their techniques, and they have to share it with all the other artists. And all we ask is that they come in and print, and whatever they print, 2 or 3 of those pieces have to go for the archives, because they have to have presence within the history of Puerto Rican workshop. You know what I mean? And this is how we run the shop. And we're planning to do this somewhere. A lot of these things I learned from Bob and also from Leopoldo Mendez. But the thing is that the humanistic side of all of this is for us to be generous. Somebody knocks at the door, listen, let's see where we could go with the person. Never say no. You never know what their problems are. You know what I mean? And let's see where we go with it. You know what? There's always the political, there's always other countries and things like that. So now listening to Bob and Elizabeth Foundation, how they affiliated because we are artists. What do us artists we want to do? We want to do the work, we want to do the techniques. I don't want to administer. I don't want to deal with the money. I mean, I get the ideas, I want to write the grants. I want somebody else to write the grants. So now the Puerto Rican Workshop has affiliated with NICA, which is a big organization that do health, housing, all kinds of things. And they're going to have a component, which is going to be us, the cultural component. So it becomes a holistic component for the United States, that not only we should have housing, health, arts within the whole thing. This is how we should go nationally. So they are going to be dealing with all the administration of the Puerto Rican Workshop, and the artists, all they have to do is the art. And I learned this. I'm grateful to the Elizabeth Foundation with the Bob Blackburn Printshop for doing this, because this is the way to go.
It's quite remarkable that Nitza's representing a workshop that's existed for 57 years. Eleanor is representing the Lower East Side Printshop, which is still in functioning, and the Printmaking Workshop, under the auspices of Essye, Justin, and Jazmine, is flourishing and getting really expanded, doing collaborations. But the thing that you said, Lauren, about communities is a very intriguing humanistic question. How do communities develop? When I was at the Printmaking Workshop, it was the late 70s and all through the 80s. Many of the communities that were formed because there was a deficit of having a voice. They were formed out of a necessity to create a voice and be acknowledged. So you had Black women artists, you had printmakers, you had painters, you had the artists from Brooklyn, you had the conceptual artists, you had the printmakers, you had the Wayusi artists, the Where We At, Guerrilla Girls, Heresies. There were scores and scores and scores of different focal points that people needed to have to be in community with like-minded people who had the same experience, and many times the experience was an experience of victimization, which was the reason for them bonding together. In addition to all that, a lot of our federal, state, and city funding for the arts acknowledged these realities. So we formed relations with Special Arts Services at the New York State Council on the Arts, Expansion Arts with Benny Andrews at the NEA, the city, Maria Artesi, remember Maria Artesi at the City of New York? So a lot of the funding was made possible for workshops and presenting organizations as well, as well as conventional categorical organizations that dealt with theater or music or dance. So we had a plethora of avenues, and many of them intersected. So although maybe I was mostly functioning at the printmaking workshop, I could go uptown and check out what was going on at Taller Boricua. And there were many interrelationships and internetworks. We weren't as narcissistic then as we are now. We really were coming more from a humanistic point of view. And amongst African American arts and artists, there really still was a sense of up the race. Let's bring our younger artists of color up into society, up into culture. Let's give them visibility, let's give them agency, let's acknowledge them. And the fact of the matter is, many times the narratives or the thematic issues in the content of the imagery was much more engaging because there were so many untold stories revealed. And I think that's part of, you know, the community aspect.
Could I
Yeah.
say something
Yeah.
in relation to
Yeah.
that? Valerie Maynard, whom Jazmine remembered her name, I'm so grateful because she did work at Bob's shop.
Yes, she did.
Yes.
She did.
She had the idea. She had a group of printmakers up in Harlem, and she said, let's have a conversation of prints between Harlem and the Lower East Side. Now, just that idea was so different than the so-called art world of the era.
And did you know that Halima Taha just had Valerie's gates fabricated for Hammond's House Galleries in
No.
Atlanta? Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good. Also, you know, it's also by if you travel to other states, now you see that they're popping up with printmaking places. Because Minnesota has the Highland Printmaking Fantastic Studio, you know, and they invite artists, you know, there's a lot of things happening in California. The Chicanos are very, very strong. Arizona, Chicago, Los Angeles, you know. Mexico is still very strong. Puerto Rico, there's a couple of places over there. Young people are popping up. So it is happening. And I hope that we have more conversations about our social injustices in this country where we can talk through the printmaking and bring young people and other families to really talk about these things and do portfolios and things like that. I think we need to go in some kind of direction. Thank you.
This was not a prepared question, but it's been so wonderful being in this space and seeing this work all together in this way for the first time for me. I know we only had a little bit of time before we got here, but did seeing anything in this room, any of these prints again, maybe for the first time in a long time, jog any memories or any experiences or other kinds of, I mean, having everyone in this space here together, I'm sure, like you just explained, kind of opened up a new thought for the first time in a long time. Was any of this art kind of a memento in a similar way by any chance?
It's like it's tattooed in your consciousness. A lot of these images, they're like old friends. And a lot of the people in the audience are old friends. And a lot of we've learned from each other, we've helped each other. Here we have I'm sorry, I have to do this, the creator of a water-based printmaking ink system that was acquired by Speedball, Susan Rostow, talking about chemistry. This woman here is a brilliant person who developed an entire line of inks and auxiliary materials and a press to create water-based prints, and it was acquired by Speedball Company. So you have extraordinary information and knowledge and wisdom and creative agency in this room. And master teaching artist James Reynolds here, who recently hosted the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. So we all kind of feel connected somehow. If somebody's walking down the street and they say, oh yeah, didn't you work at the Bob Blackburn Workshop or the Lower East Side Printshop, or did you know Nitza Tufiño? Oh yeah, you feel connected. You feel like you're part of this never-ending community family, extended family.
The images. All those images are inside of us. They're out there, but what happens is, reminds me what Carl Jung talks about images, that they become ingrained within the community, you know what I mean, and your mind. So when you see something, you identify immediately with that. So we are, as colored people, we're beginning to see ourselves, which we weren't seen before. We were not around. And this is something that the printmaking workshop did, and also the Mexicans, you know, even with Posada, you know. And I think we need to continue this, and I hope, you know, it happens more and that it continues and more places will open up, and printmaking be taken more seriously as an art form. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, there's as we become more digitized, I think people there's a restlessness. I mean, if you're a creative person, you live with a certain level of frustration. You don't know what to do with that energy. You feel like you have to create a new reality. You have to define a reality that you are experiencing somehow, intellectually or emotionally or spiritually, and there's a restlessness, and you want to, we're human beings, we have tactile urges, we have sensuality in our bodies, we have the need to actually physically create things. So I think that maybe as a pushback to the digital age, that will encourage more people to go back to those handmade things, the textures of the paper, the ink qualities, the saturation points. All of that is something that human beings really need. And as Nitza is pointing out, the social, political, cultural construct of society is moving in a way where we have to make sure our voices are articulated in a way that touches everybody. And the arts is the only way in the universe of human endeavor that can do that. It is the only aspect of civilization that can touch the inner heart of every human being. So there is a mandate there.
It's the spirit. It's the spirit.
Yeah.
It's the spirit.
Yeah.
So hearing you, Nitza, talk about the kind of spread of printmaking and the way printmaking exists in all of these places across the United States, I think that's 100% true. But what we have here and represented in this in this panel here is the commitment to community that makes it quite distinct. That, of course, all print shops play a vital role in sustaining knowledge and spreading knowledge and uplifting voices and creating platforms. But you know, for every one kind of shop, there's a shop that's also about the intergenerationality that Eleanor speaks of, the platforming of racial diversity and those voices, and also the ways in which the shops you've all been participating in, as you've already been discussing, is participating in politics unfold in real time. And I think, you know, as I've come to learn about your collective experiences, that there is that immediacy, that attention, and in some ways that must have been present as people came together within the shop, and then the ways in which you each went out into different other communities and brought that urgency with you, that it didn't just stay in the shop, that you became parts of new communities and larger communities of, you know, all different stripes.
Please. I have something to say about Bob's shop. Bob's shop was powerful across the country. And I'll tell you specifically what I mean. I came in from University of Colorado to Bob's shop. The year before, I had put a print along with everybody else at the University of Colorado, which had a good working print shop and lots of copper, because they mine copper out there. And everybody sent in a print to the Brooklyn Museum Biennial. Nobody got in. Nobody had ever got in from Colorado. I came back, I had the same print, I reprinted it, and it went into the biennial. And I realized, gee, it's the same print. And people kept writing to me and saying, we're so honored that somebody from the University of Colorado got into this show. I thought, you know, I don't think Bob knew how powerful he was. Or how centralized. It was not Bob's doing or his intention, but Bob was a center for having printmaking go out to the world. And we have to think of ways of expanding that, because the University of Iowa has a terrific printmaking workshop.
Virginia
They're
Miners.
all over the state universities. They're very important institutions,
Right.
but they aren't part of the New York City art world, and therefore they don't get seen. We've got a whole nation which is now under attack, which needs expression, needs to be recognized.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah, like the Dorsky Museum highlighting Ben Wigfield's Communication Village up in New Paltz, where he invited Vincent Smith, Betty Blayton, I'm not sure if Mel Edwards was there, a number of artists who created a whole platform for interrelating and working with the students. Bob had 5 honorary doctoral degrees.
That's right.
And he also was a recipient of the MacArthur Genius Award, in addition to a number of other accolades, some given by different countries. You couldn't really go anywhere from Greenwich Village up through Harlem with Bob without him meeting somebody in the street that he knew, or that knew him, or had something to thank him for. But I think that he did know how widespread he would never say that it was his name, he would say it was the workshop. And I think he had a really deep-rooted personal conflict about that, because he dedicated and committed a tremendous amount of his energy and resources and bandwidth to the printmaking workshop instead of his own development of his own work. And I heard him on a number of occasions talk about some of his peers and some of the societal acknowledgement that they achieved. And you knew that he meant that he felt that he could have or should have achieved that. Some of that simply was because he was a black man, period, that was it. Some of it was because he was a printmaker and not a painter. But he did I think he did know that the workshop was internationally known on a certain level, because there was daily evidence of it because of the people that were working at the workshop. One day I walked into the workshop and there was a colleague of mine from the printmaking workshop I had worked in Amsterdam years before. I had lost touch with him, Jacques Van Alphen, sitting there waiting to be, addressed in the office. Things like that would happen often. So he was really widely known, and he couldn't really, there was a real painful issue. There was a certain point where a lot of the arts organizations that in New York City that had been started by artists got to a point of success where the funding sources were encouraging them to bring on administrative directors to work alongside them as creative directors, which meant that they had to have real board members from corporate experience and not friends of friends and uncles, cousins, sisters, brother. And they had to really try to delineate the difference between administrative activity and creative activity. And I remember being on a number of funding panels. This was a point of discussion for many years in the 80s. some of the organizations like Negro Ensemble Company, Alvin Ailey were very successful, Museo del Barrio, in achieving that. But places like Bob Blackburn's, it was almost impossible for us to, I mean, even to try to separate Bob's personal print collection from the Printmaking Workshop's collection, because there was a standard guideline that everybody who worked in the Printmaking Workshop had to donate two prints from each edition, or 2 prints from every series of 5 monotypes to the print collection. But trying to even separate Bob's collection from the Works Club's collection, you could tell he would get into a panic. It was something that he could not psychologically or intellectually make that distinction. So there were a lot of organizations like the brilliant dance organization Sounds in Motion with Diane McIntyre that they just could not make that step in order to then secure higher funding and be considered more viable as nonprofit organizations. So,
Can I say something?
yeah,
Listen,
yeah.
it's very important that we understand this. That's why Boricua, the Puerto Rican Workshop, decided to affiliate with NICA, because the 501c3 exists. NICA has one too, but they control it and they do all the administration. The artists, what they do is the art and the curating and other things, and the archives is wrong. You understand? So they bring in the money to run all of this and to continue the jobs that different people need to do these things, or the teachers or whatever. The artists are the ones that control the art, and we can better be served by experimenting, by all of these things. Why do I want to sit down and start doing checks right now when I should be in the print shop doing other things? You understand? You have to affiliate. Artists are artists, not administrators. You should stick to those jobs. Give those jobs to somebody else who can do that. If they're corporate and CEO, good luck, and we'll work together.
Yeah.
We control the archives. It's historical. You understand what I mean? But in terms of the money and all those things, we need to go a different way. And this is what Elizabeth Foundation and the Paul Blackburn, this is the perfect way.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because I think one of the biggest problems with that, you're right, theoretically, I think, Nitza, it does make sense. But from my experience with Bob is that, okay, I would put together a budget for 12 months, a projected budget for 24 months, and document the previous year's budget. And that would all go to hell in 2 weeks when somebody would walk in from Italy and Bob said, oh, okay, we got to order some more BFK Reeves. We're going to go get some more Hanty. We're getting this, we're getting that. We're going to copper plate the zinc, and we're going to do this. And the problem with it is that you can't predict creativity. And if you really want to submit to what the creative voice tells you, you can't put a stop on it. And printmaking is a very expensive art form.
Well, that's why
So,
you
but
need someone to say,
what I'm saying,
I need $1 million.
yeah, I can tell you that I tried for 11 years to get this man to follow a structure, and the only way it would work was that in the checkbook that I had control of, I would put the true amount of the balance on the back in pencil so he couldn't see it, and then I would put a much lower amount, like it's $8,000 lower, on the front in ink, so he thought we had less money than we had, because otherwise he'd just spend up all the money. But this whole thing about the Printmaking Workshop and many other arts organizations that really want to seize the activity, the current of the day, and what actual human people are living in the moment, it's very difficult to administrate that. We all know that, because we all struggle with that. And sometimes we'll say, okay, well, I'll just let myself fly for 3 months, and then I'll buckle and harness it back in. I'll be eating rice and beans now till December. But what Nitza's saying is theoretically very intelligent and makes a lot of sense, but I'm not really sure how realistic it is if you are managing an organization that services so many different creative minds. And if you're in a situation of rapid cultural, societal activity that demands a voice and demands a response, you want to address it. You want to be there. You want to be a part of it. You can't wait until the next fiscal year. So I think each organization finds their own way. Clearly, Essye, Justin have figured out how to keep the printmaking workshop going, and I'm grateful for that. But I think that each organization finds its level and works with what suits them, what's appropriate for them.
Nitza, would you like to say something else? Or
Well, the thing is that a CEO is a CEO. They know how to administer, they know, and you tell them, I need $1 million. That's his job, to go get the money. My job is to find out what projects, what things I'm gonna do, how much it's gonna cost me, and then just throw it out there and tell them that's what I want. I need a machine, I need 2 machines, I need to get another space, it's gonna cost so much money. That's it, and put people to work. I don't wanna be involved in doing that job because I think they can do. They went to school, they studied business, they did all that stuff, and they know how to do it. So why should I invent a new? I know how to do my job. He doesn't know how to do or be an artist, and that's what we need to do. We can't do both. It's impossible. We misspend money. You understand what I'm saying? It's a waste sometimes. You know what I mean? You need paper. Maybe we could get it wholesale for much more. So why should I be spending 1 day, 2 days trying to do those things or ink while somebody else can do that? While the artist is really working on the art and all of this thing, or teaching, or working on expressions, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Social services. Why isn't it social services? Great, Bob used to take those little presses to the church. Why? It's so important for people to express themselves, to talk about how they're feeling and things like that, and do it through the arts. That's what we used to do. He taught us how to do that. So we got to make it better.
When the Lower East Side print shop began, we had no money. We used people's kitchen floors for our linoleum. We really scrounged. We got paper from the street. You know, we were in a printing territory, so there was paper around. The Puck building had ink supplies in it. It had been a printer's. And we used to go to the Puck building and they'd give us old drying ink. So we operated, and it was in my place, which had been it was a 1-room apartment, but it also had been a factory, so it had lots of electricity and space, and we put sawhorses up and doors for tables and found chairs on the street. So we operated with no money, and we made an awful lot of prints with no money. I had an old press that said "Aid in England" on that side of it, but it worked. I've often thought we would have done better if we had just drawn and found books. I had a bookbinding press, but sooner or later we got a brand press. We finally did. The fact is that we operated with no money. The New York State Council on the Arts got in touch with me and said, we're forming an organization called the Seven Loaves. Do you know about that? The Seven Loaves, it was 7 organizations on the Lower East Side. Due to a critical time in New York City history, we got together the 4th Street there was a whole bunch of organizations, none of which survived except for the Lower East Side Printshop. It was a miracle, the Lower East Side Printshop. But we were all taught how to write grants. Now, writing grants, as you know, all of this kind of thing is a technique in itself.
She don't do that. I salute you, girl.
It takes a huge amount of time. And in my case, I had been showing prints. I'd been earning a living by showing prints before I started teaching. Suddenly, I never got back into the gallery scene. I never did, because I was writing grants. And really, I think that was a great loss from me. And why should people, you know, we have different kinds of skills. And I don't think that problem has been solved yet.
But that's what I'm saying. You need the corporate world.
I do have to say that my experience with Bob writing grants really trained me for learning how to recreate most of the contracts that were delivered to me by arts organizations, which I didn't like. So I learned how to negotiate. I learned how to write my own grants, my proposals for my public art commissions, how to be a hardliner, how to use all my testosterone in all my navigations of contract writing and agreeing. But it was through, oftentimes when you're working with an organization that doesn't have enough resources for the projects that it's administering, you learn a lot. And I think some of the actual people at the New York State Council for the Arts, Barbara Ho and Helen Cash, took pity on me, and Marie Artesi in the Department of Cultural Affairs, because I'd go and I, you know, plunk myself down in their office. I said, help me, it's Bob. And they'd say, oh, Lord, yes, we understand. And they would show me how to be honest and develop a budget with an expense and income that made sense, that was legal and realistic at the same time. So, I mean, the thing about this country is the way that this country funds its arts is probably the least desirable of all the industrial countries. And they keep you in a beggar's mindset because you're constantly documenting and writing up your report for the previous year, trying to administrate and manage the current year and projecting the next year. Meanwhile, they keep shifting their focus of what they want to fund. So oftentimes you're kind of trying to twist yourself into a different shape to be eligible for the new funding. It's a very vulgar way of supporting your culture. But some of us, I must say, have been successful at it, Nitza, and I salute you for just not even dealing with it.
I learned a lot from the Cubans. Let me tell you something. I gotta give it to Belkis Ayolan. You know, how in the hell, you know, they used to just get the ink from the newspaper. And they used to work with that. They used to cut cardboard and all kinds of stuff. You know what I'm saying?
You get industry.
The taller experimental in Cuba is fantastic. And they have nothing. And those people produce stuff that is unbelievable. So have no money, but you have a heart. You know, you go to these countries and then you rediscover yourself, you know, and you hit yourself against the wall. Because, oh man, I thought I needed a big brush, I needed this. Why didn't I make my own? You know what I'm saying? So I learned a lot. I mean, Belkis Ayolan, I give it to her. Because she won a lot of prizes, and you could see her going to the airport with her big prints rolled up and biking in a bike. You know what I'm saying? So here we are, and in a way we're spoiled, in a way where maybe, I don't know, but we have to look at ourselves. And I believe more of a holistic approach, where we talk about printmaking and expression for our community, and Bob, you know, going to churches, going to housing, schools. Why is it in schools you don't have a printing press? Why you don't teach the children to express themselves and say, well, you know, get all that stuff out, you know what I'm saying? So you live and you learn, you know, sometimes we gotta look ourselves. I mean, life has been good to me, but I fought a lot like hell. But we must continue, and we must nurture young people, and let's see where we go ahead. And there's still ways to experiment and be scientific, how to deal with money, how to deal with all kinds of things, and make those combinations so that we can move forward. I don't know if I talked too much.
No, it's good, it's good, it's all good. I mean, everybody's experience, even though they intersect, is very specific to the conditions of the construct of their particular workshop. I think that probably one of the things that's the most uniquely influential aspects of Bob Blackburn's printmaking workshop is the national intersectability of the people who have participated through the years, through the decades, and his universal global view. Really a very large vision, because printmaking is in some ways very local and very specific. It's very intimate. It conventionally deals with paper, which is a very intimate material, I think, when you consider it alongside metals or glass or fabrics or different kinds of substrates. Paper is a very personal kind of a material. The wonderful thing about printmaking is there's constantly new inventions, and now in the digital age, there are all kinds of new iterations of printmaking. One thing that I will mention is that Bob Blackburn was adamantly, really passionately opposed to any kind of screen printing or silk screening at all. He would not allow it at all at the printmaking workshop. So within the limitations of what he felt he wanted to support, there were mezzotints, woodcut, linoleum block, collograph, color viscosity, lithography on plates, lithography on stones, all kinds of monoprinting with painterly approaches. There were people at the printmaking workshop who really created very commercial editions where they would write the formulas of their ink mixes, their ink and oil mixes, print a few APs, pack it away, and if somebody wanted to buy the edition, they'd come back and they'd look at the formulas again and print the entire edition. There were other people that really concentrated on monoprints, and they had their own definition of what that meant. There were combinations of mixing collographs with etching. There were so many different approaches that it could be at times overwhelming. But I think that's what Bob wanted to encourage. I think that element of experimentation, he was really passionately supporting that. And you could hardly keep up with it because as many people as working in the workshop, that was all those many different approaches. So I guess that kind of a home or a garden or a platform for expression and experimentation and exploration really best defines Bob's workshop.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's a
I
great
agree.
segue into one of my other questions, which was, now is a wonderful moment to reflect on his legacy, not just, in the sense of interpersonally, but also in the work that you went on to do, much of which you've already discussed with us and shared. But do you have any other sense in taking a long view back in time and observing the way in which his impact has resonated over these decades, other aspects of his legacy that perhaps we haven't discussed so far? And experimentation, international reach, these are all really, intergenerationality, these are all really potent legacies.
It just comes down to love. Bob believed in humanity.
Yes.
Bob believed that we were all, look, the bottom line is you either believe we're all connected or you don't.
Exactly.
So that, I think that's what Bob believed in. Bob loved people, he loved art, he loved printmaking, he loved being a person that could welcome and offer this world to anybody and everybody who wanted it. And he lived and died with that, and it's really very simple. Everybody takes it in their own experience, in their own references, and makes of it what is appropriate for their life experience. And I think that this is a wonderful testament to the core and the essence of human engagement and community building, because it's all a very simple, thing.
I agree with you 100% because something that Bob had that made him bigger than life was that if you were a human being, he would invite you over. You never did a print. Or you said, I don't know how to do that. I don't know where to start. He will find a way to turn you on. I mean, forget it. You were going to be turned on, and before you knew it, you were there every day.
Yeah. I went into the printmaking workshop one day in the late morning, early afternoon, and I was told that the sheriff came to arrest Bob for some, I don't know what. By the time he got down the elevator, Bob had him coming back up to make a print. Bob, we went one time when Bob was receiving the governor's award, and by the end of the dinner, Bob had invited the governor's administrators to come to the printmaking workshop. I mean, it was just pouring out of him all. This was a man who wanted to give so that you could find your own voice. Yeah. And the beautiful thing about it was the whole time that we were working so hard for no money, we were playing. Yeah. We were really playing. We were experimenting. We were exploring. We were trying to figure things out. And that is the most glorious thing. I mean, if you can be doing something that's so terribly serious and defines your entire existence and be playing, what better life could you have?
I'd rather play.
Yeah.
Great.
Are there any last thoughts before we turn over to questions? Anything that you'd thought of that didn't have the right moment to come out? Otherwise, we've got friends and family, community members in our audience that I'm sure have memories of their own to share or questions for the folks up here.
Nitza, ¿tú no tienes nada para llevarlas adelante?
I mean, I said, all I can say, if you want to know about Bob, come to the Puerto Rican workshop and we'll do a print. That's all I have to say. Then you will know what we're talking about, okay? You can't do it any other way. You're not going to rediscover the wheel. This is how it happens. This is how you give of yourself, and that's what he taught us. To be open, to give of yourself, and find a way to turn that person on. That's what he did.
Yes,
so please come to the Puerto Rican workshop. Look it up in the internet. We're there. Okay?
All right, questions? We're waiting on a microphone.
Oh, I don't need one. When's the reality show coming out?
That's a good idea.
I'm jet lagged, and I was just like, I'm amped all the way up.
It's not
going phenomenal.
Thank you. That's the mentor.
You
He did it.
single-handedly thrust hope into this room, given where we are right now. Like, I could talk about it all day long, but the three of you together have given us a level of hope that defies rapists and felons everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second row, and then we'll do the first row. And since there's no passing mic, I may restate your question. Let's see. So the question?
Okay, I'm Eleanor's daughter, and I grew up in that time period, and it was a very special time. I mean, a lot of people portray the 60s and 70s as, like drugs and violence and everything, but it was really special to grow up in that arena where, everybody was helping each other, we were trying to break down racial barriers, and so it was a hopeful time, and I'm just wondering, how do we get it back? How do we get back to that out of the mess that we're in now?
The reality show.
I hear in that observation and that question an acknowledgement of the cyclical nature of our political lives and how that intersects with our artistic lives and the ways in which we build community to serve both. How do you reflect upon the challenges or the optimism that went into the building of your workshops after your time with Bob? Was there a sense of what was your sense of politics at the time?
Social justice. It's always social justice. Since we have it in Puerto Rico, and I went with Leopoldo Mon del Taller de Gráfica Popular, Elizabeth Catlett, Charles White, Romero Bilder, Critchlow, Jacob Lawrence, all these people, all those cats, they used to go to the diner, remember? And we used to have breakfast all together with Bob, and the conversations were fantastic. I think we need to do that. We need to be more, how would I say, more together in that sense, more open, and be more with people, start conversations and things like that. It don't matter positive, negative, dialogue. I think we need to do that, and prints also do that. But we must have some wine together, some breakfast together, and Bob was very big at that. When he was living in Chelsea, we used to go all the time. Okay, guys, let's go, let's have some breakfast. And then we used to discuss and stuff like that. We need to have more dialogue. I'm
curious also, you mentioned briefly of your time as an educator, and Eleanor, you as well, working with children. In your observation of your own childhood in this climate, what was it like creating opportunities for children in particular when there was so much political turmoil, whether it would be at El Museo or at the Lower East Side Printshop? Was there any of that experience related to the work with kids?
It didn't exist. It was because things broke down that we had to do something. And I feel we're about at that moment again. We don't know what we can do. We have to do something. You just don't give up. And it's very interesting, since we don't know, the idea of bringing many generations together was an accident of the schools closing down and then the colleges closing down. We brought people together because of necessity. So sometimes you have to have your eyes and ears open to see what you can do next.
Right. I mean, we at the Puerto Rican workshop, I thought of piragua cards. You know the piragua cards? The ices?
The red cards.
Yeah, the little card you push around, you do piragua. We do linoleum. We go outside, put the paper there and the ink, and we stand in the corner and we tell people, come and make a print. Express yourself. You're a child, you're a father, you're this. This is a nice project, and you document it. It is fantastic, and you'll see all the things that come out of that. I think we need to be more creative in that sense, to invite, to see where we can go, what things we could do. We could do it on a truck. You know what I mean? And move somewhere within a community, at a park, see what their situation is, what is the health condition there. We can start the dialogue that way through prints. So I think that moving forward, the whole situation in terms of prints, not only doing and making it better and experimenting, but it's how do we reach people out there in terms of dialogue.
Lauren, you're asking about social turmoil. If you think globally, there's always social turmoil somewhere in the world, and depending on who you are, if you're from Rwanda or Ireland or Senegal or Guatemala or Red Hook, if you're a person of color in this country, if you are speaking another language as your native language, if you're Jewish, if you're gay, if you're mentally fluid, if you're handicapped, you are somehow brutalized and victimized, and you are constantly figuring out ways to thrive and prosper. This is nothing new. So everybody getting all freaked out about what's going on. For many of this is just a matter of course, it's cyclical. And I think what's happened is that a lot of Caucasian Americans who are middle class and who have been able to achieve the diluted mythology of the American dream just really were not exposed to the challenges and the victimization that probably the majority of citizens in this country at some point experienced. So they're really not aware. So we know we can be laughing about racism because we're still here after 400 years. We know that we survived the Holocaust. We know that the British didn't murder us all because we're Catholic. Many of us know all of this, and we have been able to celebrate life, to make love and have babies and eat chocolate and live. Yeah. So it's really a matter of what Nitza's saying, what Eleanor is saying, is just do what you can to connect, do what you can to be creative, do what you can to celebrate, do what you can to build community, because that is the only answer. The truth at some point will always win. It's just a matter of how many of us are going to suffer in the meantime. And people have been suffering since the age of humanity. That is nothing new. And if we don't really give our children and our grandchildren and our nieces and our nephews an understanding that regardless of what's going on, you have to celebrate life at all costs, we are not doing them any service. We are not preparing them to be activated citizens with a voice and an intention to build humanity. Shielding them from that is not helpful. It's just making them passive, it's making them fearful. And none of us would be sitting here today if we had not learned how to not only survive, but thrive and prosper.
That's right.
But not writing proposals. That's what they're going to put on your tombstone. I didn't write any proposals.
Yeah, no.
There was a question up here in the front.
I just wanted to know why Bob didn't allow the silk screen or screen print.
I think
Anti-screen print, go.
I think he thought it was too easy. But I think also at the time, the quality of the inks, well, at the time that I was at the workshop, the quality of the inks were not as good as they are now. And the techniques were not as, you couldn't do as many complex things. So I think he just thought it was like probably too easy.
Yeah. I remember.
Well,
That's what somebody
I remember
said.
him saying that it was too commercial. It's for graphic.
Well, I mean, I gotta say
yeah.
something about that.
Yeah, Bob did
Puerto
have a
Rico
very
is in-
conventional attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, he did have a very conventional attitude about printmaking and art because that's how he came up. With a tradition that was documented and disseminated throughout the world. And in New York, there are always it's a place where a lot of new inventions are happening, and I think he just kind of blocked it out.
Yeah, in Puerto Rico is very well known for all the silk screen that they did through the years, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 80s. And the Germans were very much interested in what was happening in Puerto Rico. It's just that printmaking is totally different from silk screen. I mean, in terms of, the images and stuff like that. In Puerto Rico, they did it like that because this was a program from the government of Puerto Rico where they will send social workers into the countryside who will make studies to see what were the problems and to make cooperatives with the Jibaros, and they will say what the problems were and all of that. And then writers will come in, filmmakers and all of that, and they used to make films. And it was called División Educación de la Comunidad. So it became very, very famous. It became, and that was sponsored by Muñoz Marín. You know what I mean? But they were very, and there's books about it and all of that. But I don't think, printmaking and what Bob was doing and even Taller de Gráfica Popular, they never did silk screen. They did the same thing that Bob was doing, you know what I mean? And they never went that route, So it depends, we're in the Caribbean, how many presses you want to have, it gets complicated. But it was more about history in Puerto Rico and teaching the countryside, certain things. It was more about film. That's how James Baldwin made it to Puerto Rico, because he wanted to see the films that Divesco was producing and the seal screens. You know what I mean? And also, Martin Luther King made it because he went over there to talk about the civil rights movement. Also, Stockley Carmichael. So there's a big relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States and the Puerto Ricans that came here through immigration because of agriculture. So.
There was a question right here.
So, what you're saying that right now, the situation, we really, really need to keep the communications with making prints and community. It's so essential with this current confrontation of the country and the world. But I'm wondering, I'm an artist, as a beginning printmaker. Besides, you mentioned the Puerto Rico workshop, are there other places you recommend for beginning printmakers to go to?
Well, there's the Lower East Side Printshop. There's Bob Blackburn's Printmaking Workshop on 39th Street.
Right.
There's Taller Boricua. There's Taller Latinoamericano. No sé dónde queda
No,
eso, pero-
it doesn't exist
Yeah,
anymore.
no, yeah.
It doesn't exist
There's a
anymore.
number of workshops all of these 3 workshops still exist.
In New York. And then
In New
there's
York
another one
City.
in Philadelphia. There's another one in Minnesota. There's a couple of places that you could Google.
There's the
and see.
Manhattan Graphic Center also.
It's at the Manhattan Graphic Center.
So there are the Manhattan Graphic Center, Robert Blackburn's Printmaking Workshop, the Lower East Side Print Shop, and Taller Boricua's
Right.
Print Shop, where they don't have to write
And always remember
proposals.
some of the universities, CUNY has a print shop, you
Yeah.
know, where they teach print shop and all of that. That
And
they
I,
don't,
I would say that these print shops existing for this period of time is miraculous.
oh yeah, it is, it is.
You know, you think of all the arts organizations that have bitten the dust in the meantime.
Yeah.
We were just saying the Lower East Side Print Shop is now 57 years old.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it did happen because there was enough energy among, you know, large groups of people. It wasn't dependent on one person. It was dependent on a community building, which we have to relearn. We really do have to relearn that.
Yeah, I gotta say something about, this is very important. As you know, Puerto Ricans are American citizens. Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. So what happens with that? With printmaking and artists that are Puerto Rican and doing the Puerto Rican workshop, what happens? We don't have an embassy. We don't have consulate. So the only place that we can unite with other artists to discuss social issues and concerns about the island and probably the Caribbean is the Puerto Rican workshop, the New Yorkers Poet Cafe, okay? That's why Pedro Pietri, the poet, okay, he said, he called us, you know, we have our embassies. El Museo del Barrio is our embassy. It's the only places that we have where we can discuss these things. So that's why we survive. We survive, and we will keep on surviving and fighting. And we will still do prints, I don't care where, in the street with piragua carts, at the airport, I don't care. It's gonna happen because it's about survival.